Hello and welcome to episode 14 of Interstellar Quest. In this episode we are going to be doing some error capturing around Duna, a couple of vehicles, and also just sort of tidying up a few other bits around Jewel. So at the moment we've just entered the Duna sphere of influence for this refinery, but the periapsis is far too high, so I'm trying to get it low enough so that we start getting error capture altitudes, which is about, in this case I think I'm aiming for about 12 kilometers altitude. You can see we're quite inclined as well, so it's going to be sort of a fairly sort of polarish orbit or very highly inclined orbit. Okay, and there we go, we've got 117 kilometer altitude. I think that's probably still too high. I need to lower it down a little bit further. I'm just going to start stowing all the deployables, so we're in a sort of a nice safe altitude for entry into Duna. Gets pointed prograde as well. So I've just added another manoeuvre node to make sure that we get the periapsis low enough. I'm just going to point perpendicular to our orbit again, try and find the manoeuvre node, and then start burning. There we go. These thrusters are pretty good. Don't use too much fuel, so they're quite versatile in this situation. Okay, so we've now got our 11.6 kilometer altitude periapsis, which is perfect for us. We should be able to get a good error capture here now. And the atmosphere of Duna is quite thin, so even such a low periapsis we should be okay. But I'll keep an eye on the temperature of the heat shields and stuff as we come through the atmosphere. I'm also going to use the thrusters, as you can see now, just to try and slow our orbital velocity down before we hit the atmosphere as well, just to make sure. You can see the polar ice cap just off to the right of the screen there, which is quite nice. You can see the periapsis as we're hitting the atmosphere. The periapsis is dropping as well, so I think I'm going to try and orientate the spacecrafts, hopefully, so we start skimming and try and get some lifting off of those heat shields to try and make sure that we capture rather than just go for a straight descent. But we'll have to see what we can do. You can see there the capture was happening quite well. The apoapsis was coming down, and we're now getting the heat effects on the vehicle itself as well. I'm going to try and use the thrusters, try and get our altitude up so we're not going to crash into the surface too much. I've had to deploy the parachutes just to increase the drag. I think we're going to just have to make the straight descent anyway. Perhaps such a low periapsis altitude was not advisable really for this first orbit, but hopefully we'll land somewhere accessible. Okay, so our orbital speed was coming down quite well there. Jettisoned now the heat shields, and there they go, just destroyed there, crashed into the planet. Going to use the thrusters just to bring our surface velocity below 10, and there we go, touchdown, but wonderful. Just deploy the radiators and start water extraction. Okay, with this post commentary I've realised that we're we don't seem to be using any of the power that the fission reactor is giving us. So I'm going to hopefully have to, if I can land anywhere near the refinery, maybe we can look at trying to transfer the power from the reactor to the refineries. So we've now just hit the alarm for the dual probe. Here, this is just a small manoeuvre just to raise, I think, the periapsis so that we don't do another aero capture at Joule itself, and I'm trying to aim for another one of Joule's moon's orbits so we can see if we can get a nice capture in a couple of orbits time perhaps. And then again, we're just adding a manoeuvre node to lower the apoapsis so that we're in the moon radii. So we've now jumped back to the Duna system, and this is of course the manned probe that's just arrived in the Duna sphere of influence, and here we're setting up again for a error capture. So I'm in the same situation where I need to lower the periapsis down to a reasonable height, and then get into position for error capture. So we expand the heat shield on the front of the ship. Just capturing a little bit of science, and then we'll start to stow the solar arrays, radiators and so on, so we're ready for streamlined for the error capture at Duna itself. We'll just turn the spacecraft the other way around to point prograde, so that at least we've got the heat shield at the right end of the spacecraft. Okay, I think that there's just too much drag produced by the item at the back, so we are getting pulled around. We're going to end up pointing retrograde. So I'll just keep an eye on the main engine at the back, see how the temperature fares on that, and hopefully it will survive this capture. The temperature there is about 580 degrees Celsius. We've got a capture and the apoapsis is coming down. Hopefully we'll leave the atmosphere before the apoapsis comes down too far. It looks like that's going to be okay because we're going back up now and everything survived entry. So just add a node at the apoapsis just to raise the periapsis so that we're in a nice stable orbit, and start redeploying the solar arrays and radiators. Just while we're in orbit here, it's worthwhile just capturing as much science as we can. We'll just make this burn. It's nice small burn, only 34 minutes away, so, and it's only 19.5 meters per second, so unfortunately it looks like our apoapsis is too high for the ScanSat SAR sensor to actually provide any data, so we'll have to lower that apoapsis at some point just so that we can get constant data and get a good map created of Duna with that sensor. I'm just going to add a maneuver node for the return transfer window from Duna back to Kerbal, just to make sure that it's sitting there so we can keep an eye on it and we're ready for the return transfer. We don't want to leave any Kerbals left behind, we want to get them all home. Okay, I'm just reducing the apoapsis height. I've not gone for a circularized orbit, I want to keep a high altitude where at the ascending nodes, just so that we can do our plane change at high altitude, which is lower speed, and hopefully save a little bit of delta V there. I'm just taking the opportunity to send as much science data back as possible as well while we're here. Just check all of the experiments we've got here and send them to the science lab and send them back. So I'm pretty much just going to leave that probe there and let it map the surface of Duna. Just going to jump back over to the other probe and send the information back from the altimetry sensor. and then switch on the multispectral scan, try and get a complete map as much as possible. And we're just jumping back now to that dual probe. The alarms come up to lower that apoapsis height. So we're just going to make that manoeuvre now. These small ships, the thrust coming off this thruster does seem to disturb the attitude quite a bit. So you've got to be maybe just run it at 60% thrust, or be very careful with your attitude. So the last thing that we're going to do in this episode is do the plane change for this probe, so that we line up with I think it's BOP, which is quite highly inclined in this orbit, and we'll leave it there. I just want to say thanks very much for watching this episode, and give me a thumbs up